Welcome to the CEC report. It's 28th of March. I'm Robert Barwick and I'm joined again by CEC leader Craig Isherwood. Welcome, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie.
In this week's CEC report, the CEC has the answer to Joe Hockey's question. Glass Steagal. This is a bailout. Hand over your deposits. And finally, the 30th anniversary of the best plan to avoid nuclear war. First, the CEC has the answer to Joe Hockey's question. Glass Steagal. Craig, we're in a very interesting point in the Australian economic debate because, and undoubtedly thanks to us putting the spotlight on it, there's a lot of attention on the state of the banks. A lot. And we have a likely future treasurer, Joe Hockey, who perhaps because of electioneering, where he wants to be seen to be a little bit different to the line from the government that all is fine, all is sound, don't worry.
Well, Robbie, just before this program, I heard Joe Hockey on the radio live saying that in 2008 our banks were in trouble, and it was only for the government's extension of the AAA credit rating that they were actually able to be saved. That's
very important because you very seldom hear an acknowledgement of that in a sort of like a popular forum.
Yeah.
Economists talk about it among closed doors, etc. The public's not supposed to have that impression. We've been screaming about it, so Hockey's echoing that.
He knows what he's inheriting, potentially as an ex-treasurer, and also he was talking about Australia's huge debt problem, which has been exacerbated by the government's race to borrow monies overseas and competition, all sorts of stuff like that. But the point is that he has acknowledged what we've actually said on this program many times about the nature of the financial crisis, and that Australian banks are not as safe and sound as people make them out to be.
Now, Craig, the other possible reason he's doing this is because he has a lot to make up for in terms of credibility, which we'll demonstrate in a minute. But specifically what I want to focus on is he is calling for an inquiry into the nature of Australia's financial banking system, specifically the fact that we have this dominance of 4 big banks, and they have an implicit taxpayer guarantee which makes them even more dominant, and what should be done about that.
What do you mean they're too big to fail?
Too big to fail.
And therefore the government's got to step in and lend them credit ratings and so forth.
Exactly, and well, since they've done it once, now that they've effectively discontinued that, or actually discontinued that, everyone knows though that if they get into trouble again, they do it again. So that becomes an implicit guarantee.
But it's going to get worse each time, so the question is how far the hands go into our pockets.
Yes. So Hockey wants an inquiry into this. Well, Joe, you watching, Joe? We're here. We're over here, and we've got the answer. We've been harping on about nothing but for 3 years. It's called Glass Steagal. As our petition states, Craig, if people can get on our website and look at our petition, or if you've already seen it, Glass Steagal in Australia would break up the big 4 banks, break them up so that the guarantee on deposits would not extend to all the other things they do. It wouldn't extend to their derivatives bets and all the other investment banking trading that they do. Now, as a consequence of that, if you've got the 4 big banks broken up and you have smaller banks that hold the deposits, but even though they're smaller, they're stronger because they're just focused on that business, and that's the part the government supports, then the other specialist financial institutions that are not there to gamble, such as credit unions and building societies, etc., they would be able to compete with the banks more easily, right? They would instantly create more competition, which is one of the big concerns here. And so this is like, but dare I say it, the perfect solution. Now, Joe better listen this time, Craig, because he doesn't have a good track record. Unfortunately, his credibility is about, well, let's say it might have gone the way of his weight loss, or he might be trying to get it back. Let's see. It might be an inverse proportion to his size. Sorry, Joe. August 21st, 2007, we have a letter from Joe, and we'll put the text on the screen. Joe wrote to a constituent who had written to him with information from the CEC. So this is 2007, and the letter from the constituent warned Joe Hockey about Lyndon LaRouche and the CEC's warning that the financial crash had started, because LaRouche famously said in July 25th, 2007, The financial crash has started. There's no possibility of stopping this. This is it, right? And that was Bear Stearns had just gone under, and it was the beginning of what eventually erupted. So this is Hockey's reply on the 21st of August. He wrote, quote, "Thank you for your letter of 12 August 2007 concerning the global financial system. I have noted your views. I, however, disagree vehemently with your analysis that the world is facing a collapse of the financial markets. The last few days have indicated the financial markets, with the support of central banking institutions, are able to meet the demands that have been placed upon them." End quote. And Craig, a year later, the financial markets collapsed. Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. That's his credibility. That just proves what I said. He needs to listen to us. What he's saying now, though, is part of this larger debate that I've alluded to. Another aspect of it is the governor of the Reserve Bank has taken a contrary view. He's come out this week, on Tuesday actually. He's arguing against more inquiries, and he's actually arguing against more bank reform. And he's trying to say any reform is actually too onerous on the banking system, which is an admission itself, really. He's also trying to downplay the fact that the RBA is building up this $380 billion bailout fund. So this is sort of like the state of the debate at the moment. Here's a question for you to comment on. A lot of people, when we raised this Glass Steagal, because Glass Steagal was a US act of Congress, right, which was in place in America for 66 years. A lot of people instantly say, hang on, our banks are sound, we've got a strong financial system, Glass Steagal is not relevant here. If it's not relevant here, Craig, why are all these important people in Australia having this discussion?
Well, there's the paradox you've just elaborated. Of course, the banks aren't sound. Look, we talk about this all the time. Look at the derivatives holding of the banks, Robbie. Look at the latest derivatives holdings. And what's even more
We've got a new graph to put up on the screen which will show this.
Well, the point is that the Commonwealth Bank, right, for many years up until this last year, exposed its total notional holdings of derivatives. This year it hit them. Why is it doing that? Look at the rate of growth of the Commonwealth Bank's derivatives over the last 10 years in particular, and you'll see it's been faster than any other bank. Why are they so hooked on these derivatives? Well, it's quite well known that derivatives are actually used to hide real losses. Yep. That's what they're there for. So when you start to see this huge amount of derivatives in our banking system, you say, okay, what's really going on here? Why are these things off balance sheet? There should be nothing off balance sheet if you actually got a sound banking system. So the point though, Robbie, is that just like gamblers, people that are hooked on either pokies or going to the casino, you've got to unhook people from the idea that the banking system is nothing more than a speculative system. It's not. A banking system is made up of banks that you need to control the flow of money, right? Money, literal physical money and so forth. And credit. But the credit is actually governed by a national bank, not the private banking system. So that you have a banking system that's highly regulated, right? So that people do know their savings are guaranteed and safe. That there is the opportunity to get mortgages. There is loans that are loaned out for productive purposes, industry and so forth. And this is all governed by a national bank whose specific purpose is the idea of stimulating the physical economy. And you're talking about Glass Steagal in 1933. Well, that also gloved in with another organisation that Roosevelt developed called the Rural Finance Corporation. Initially, it was started by Herbert Hoover as a movement, as a mechanism to bail out the banks. And all the Rural Finance Corporation could do with the government's backing was to loan to banks to try and prop them up. But of course, that wasn't good enough, because as soon as the banks got the loans from the Rural Finance Corporation, they sat on them. Yep. Because they were trying to protect their own positions.
And most of those rural banks went bankrupt anyway.
Yeah, well, there's 14,000 were in trouble, and about 5,000 went bankrupt. And I think overall, after Roosevelt came in, Robbie, he reorganised the Rural Finance Corporation, and he allowed the Rural Finance Corporation to lend not just to the banks, but to industry directly, to public authorities. And what he did is he transformed the economy by literally putting credit in order to take the idle unemployed and the idled resources and put them to work.
So what you're saying there actually is that we should think of the banking system the way Ben Chifley explicitly said we should in the 1936 Royal Commission on Banking, like a utility, like your electricity supply, like your water supply. It's the banking system we should think of it in terms of functioning like that. So that it has a physical basis.
When things dry out, then you apply the water, right? Like a garden, right? That's what Ben Chifley's biggest complaint in his dissenting report on the 1930s Banking Commission that he was part of, I think 1936 I think it was that in times of economic distress, you have to have a banking system that can literally create the credit necessary to put into the system. Now, of course, we know from the Great Depression years, the banks actually contracted credit, right? And he said that's the role of a national bank. That's the role. It should have been the role of the Commonwealth Bank, but that was actually blocked by Sir Robert Gibson in those years. So what you have is, and this was a sticking point for Chifley with the banking system, and why in the late 40s he actually moved to nationalise the banks, because he saw an absolute necessity that for a sovereign country to have a sound economy, you have to have a banking system that acts in the interest of the general welfare and the development of the productive nature of the economy.
Well, to be clear, Craig, he moved to the way the banking system worked in World War II. It wasn't nationalised, but the National Bank, the Commonwealth Bank, was in charge. And he moved to make sure that was permanent after the war, that it had this functionality where it was tightly regulated. And it's because that was resisted by the private banking system, who wanted to say, the government should have no say over the banking system at all. That's what forced Chifley's hand to move to nationalise.
And that's what exactly we've got Joe Hockey on the screen saying, government has no right in the banking system whatsoever. Well, look where it's got us, Joe. It's the whole system is crashing because sovereign governments that act in the interest of their people are not involved in directing the credit for the nation.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Craig. Let's end that here. When we come back, we're going to talk about an update on Cyprus.